Hey friends, Matt here, and in this video I want to discuss different options for de-essing, particularly vocals in your mixes and productions. Now, for those of you who don't know what I mean by de-essing, it's effectively the controlling or reduction of sibilance in different sounds, particularly from things like harsh S's, T's, and F's in mainly vocal recordings. However, it can also be used to tame high frequency or sibilant frequencies in other recordings as well, maybe things like hi-hats in a drum recording, for instance. Now, de-essing can actually be achieved in a variety of different ways, and in this video I want to show you 5 different ways that you can actually go about de-essing your vocals and some of the pros and cons of each of these different ways. So here I have a vocal that I've recorded and processed to just sound a little bit nicer for the context of this demonstration, and it has some harsher sibilant sounds in it. Take a listen to this vocal.
I can see the light, but there's no way out. Trapped inside my mind, somewhere I won't be found.
So you could hear there were kind of some harsh S sounds and stuff, particularly at places like this, kind of around here as well, and in this last phrase too. Kind of each one of these different phrases has some kind of a harsh S, T, or F in it that kind of contributes to this harsh sibilant frequency. So the first way that we can go about controlling these sibilant sounds is actually just with a standard compressor. So for this to work, whatever compressor you're using needs to have a sidechain EQ input that specifically needs to be able to target a range of frequencies and not just have, say, a high pass control. Luckily, in the case of Ableton Live, the compressor does just that. So I'm gonna go ahead and add Ableton Live's compressor to this track. Next, I'm gonna open up the sidechain input section with this arrow. And then here, we're not actually gonna use the sidechain option. Instead, we're just going to engage the EQ option. And what this will do is EQ the input into this compressor and use that EQ'd input to trigger the threshold. So what we're gonna do is EQ the input just so it's focused on those higher harsh S frequencies, which in the case of this will probably sit somewhere between like 4 and 8,000 hertz. So to do this, we're gonna set our EQ here to this band pass mode, and I'm gonna engage this little headphone icon so that we can hear exactly the frequency range that this EQ is targeting. Next, I'm actually just gonna add an EQ8 after this compressor, and I'm just gonna use this EQ8 to analyze the frequency spectrum of this vocal so that we can see where those harsh sibilant sounds are occurring. Actually, let's put this obviously before the compressor.
I can see the light. I can see.
So we can see here at the S, we're kind of getting this higher range of frequencies around here. So what we're gonna do is set our frequency of our compressor to around that 4,000 or 5,000 hertz and increase the Q so we have this really narrow band of frequencies that we're targeting.
I can see the light. I can see the.
Now already we can hear that S now with this setting at 4.87 is really, really prominent. So now that we've targeted the kind of right frequency range, let's go ahead and turn off this sidechain listen. And then all we need to do is just reduce the threshold so that we can start hearing the reduction of that S sound.
I can see the light. I can see the light. I can see the light.
Because we want it to just target that really specific moment in time with that S frequency, we obviously want quite a fast attack. This 1 or 2 milliseconds will do, and a faster release. We could reduce that a little bit. And then of course, the ratio will control how much that particular sound is reduced.
I can see the light.
Without the compressor,
I can see the light.
and with.
I can see the light.
We can also switch to the activity view of the compressor here in Ableton Live to really see the moment in time that the compressor detects that S sound.
I can see the light.
And then once you have this set up, you can fine tune the exact frequency and the width of that frequency using this EQ control. I actually think it's okay here, but you might want to go and listen through the rest of the vocal to make sure that it's getting every single one of those different S or sibilant sounds. So one of the main pros with this way of de-essing is that it's available in pretty much every single digital audio workstation. Depending on how your DAW works with compression, you might need to set up the sidechain routing in a bit of a weird way, but it is pretty efficient and quick. The downside, of course, is that it's actually a full band way of working. It doesn't just target those high frequencies. Instead, what it does is uses those high frequencies to trigger the reduction of the signal across the entirety of the frequency spectrum. So if there's other stuff going on at that particular moment in time when it detects that high frequency, those other things will also get reduced. Now, typically in the case of vocal de-essing, this isn't an issue, but it may be depending on the source material that you're using and maybe even the vocal you're working with. Because of this, you might actually want to go and try another method through multiband compression. So let's turn off this compressor here and add Ableton Live's multiband dynamics device. Now, if you're unfamiliar with multiband compression, effectively what it is a compressor for different frequency bands of the material. In the case of Ableton Live's multiband dynamics, we have 3 different frequency bands that we can work with to apply compression to. And we can set the range of these different bands with these different sliders here for the high and low bands. So as you can probably guess, to apply de-essing with a multiband compressor, what we want to do is just apply compression to the high frequency band at a particular range. To do this, let's go ahead and solo this high band with this S button here, and then let's adjust the crossover here so that we can just hear those kind of harsh S frequencies when they come through. So here at this setting of 4K or so, which is roughly similar to what we had previously in the compressor, that's sounding pretty good. And from here, all we need to do is just maybe reduce the threshold and increase the ratio or decrease the ratio here of this compression so that we can apply compression to just this high frequency band. Let's unsolo this high band and take a listen to the result.
I can see the light.
From here, we can fine tune how much gain reduction we're applying by maybe reducing the ratio, backing off the threshold a little bit, and maybe even playing around with the attack and release settings to make them a bit faster too.
I can see the light.
Without.
I can see the light.
And with.
I can see the light.
Obviously, the pro of using a multiband compressor to apply de-essing is that it's really focused on that single band of frequencies. However, depending on the intensity of the compression you're applying, it can affect too much of the high frequency content. And this may be an issue because sometimes these more sibilant frequencies can be a little bit more narrow than potentially the use of these particular plugins will allow us to hone in on. Because of this, you may actually want to use a different method in the form of a dynamic EQ. So let's go ahead and turn off this multiband dynamics here and collapse this. And to demonstrate a dynamic EQ for de-essing purposes, I'm going to use FabFilter's Pro Q3. You can use pretty much any dynamic EQ you have access to. There are some free versions, there are plenty of good paid options, and there's even ways to create your own dynamic EQ inside of Ableton Live. There are videos out there. I'm actually going to do a video myself of going through how to create one in a really cool way. Stay tuned to make sure you're subscribed for that. But for the moment, let's dive into Pro Q3 and take a look at how we can use that to apply de-essing to these vocals. So let's add Pro Q3 to the vocals here. And now let's take a look at the frequency spectrum of these vocals and see if we can identify where that sibilance is.
I can see the light.
We can see that it's kind of around this area, but let's see if we can identify it even more specifically.
I can see the.
So it's kind of looking like it's a bit more around this 5 to 10K mark. So what I'm going to do is add a node here, right click, and make this dynamic. Now what's going to happen is Pro Q3 here is going to analyze the input signal for this particular band of frequencies, and then when it reaches a certain threshold, it's going to pull down the gain of this particular EQ node here, or this particular bell EQ, which is going to allow us to apply the EQ in a dynamic way, hence the name dynamic EQ. The benefit of this approach is that I can make the range of frequencies affected extremely narrow by just changing the Q value by scrolling up on my mouse wheel.
I can see the light.
Let's take a listen to just the range of frequencies that is being affected by holding down this little headphones icon. So we can see that it's not really around this range, it's kind of higher up here. So what I'm gonna do is just increase the depth of this, increase the width a little bit so that we can narrow in on that particular frequency that's causing that harsh S sound. So we can see here it's kind of around this 10K mark. Let's pull this down a little bit more and have a listen to what this is doing to the sound now.
I can see the light.
Let's make it a bit narrower.
I can see the light.
And take a listen to it without.
I can see the light.
And with.
I can see the light.
And there you have it, we've applied some de-essing to these vocals with a dynamic EQ. Now, of course, the benefit of this approach to de-essing is that it's really, really precise in terms of the frequency range that is being reduced. However, this is also the downside of this approach because sibilances generally actually have different resonances within this higher frequency range. For instance, if we take a listen to the whole vocal track, you'll be able to hear that this particular EQ isn't necessarily affecting all of the sibilances across the track.
I can see the light, but there's no way out. Trapped inside my mind, somewhere I won't be found.
You could see there was some harsher resonances here around this 5K mark, so we might actually have to go ahead and apply another dynamic EQ in this range and make it quite narrow in order for this method to correctly apply de-essing across the entirety of our vocal recording. And this is where things like dedicated De-Ess plugins can come in really handy because they're able to analyze the signal and apply this de-essing or gain reduction to these higher frequencies when needed and where needed. Now, there are plenty of options for these dedicated de-essing plugins. Let's take a look at two of them, a paid one and a free one. So let's turn off this Pro Q3 here and use another FabFilter product, the Pro De-Ess, which is a paid de-esser. Let's increase the size of the window here a little bit. And what this allows us to do is apply de-essing. We get a threshold, a range control, and the ability to change the frequency range within which this de-essing is applied. And there's a whole bunch of other controls here that are super useful too. And I find this is probably one of the best paid de-essers on the market. Now, of course, you still need to go ahead and set the range of frequencies that are being de-essed here. Because we're working with these male vocals and we've established there's kind of a resonance around 5K, I'm gonna go ahead and reduce this low band here to about 4.5, and maybe reduce this highs to around 12. And now let's play and have a listen to the result.
I can see the light, but there's no way out.
And we can see on the display the exact moments in the signal that are being de-essed. We can play around with this more by, say, reducing the threshold, increasing the range to adjust the amount of de-essing applied.
I can see the light, but there's no way out.
And what I think is also really cool is on this little audition slider here, we can actually see those particular resonances in the frequency range by the kind of brighter yellow sections.
I can see the light, but there's no way out.
Next, let's take a look at a free option, which is T-De-esser by Techovation. So I'm gonna go ahead and add T-De-esser. Let's turn off the Pro De-Ess and increase the size of this plugin. And this plugin works in effectively exactly the same range, except because it's free, we get a little bit more limited features. There is a paid Pro version, but of course, this is the free version. We get a few controls here in terms of the frequency range. We can change high, high end, low, high, or mid high. And we also get the ability to adjust the depth of the processing and things like the intensity or sharpness, which is effectively just the speed of the de-essing. So let's play around with some of these settings and see the result that we can get.
I can see the I can see the I can see the light. I can see the light. I can see the light.
So there is with the de-esser.
I can see the light.
and without the de-esser. And you can hear that's a pretty drastic difference. And let's play the entirety of this vocal performance so we can really hear what this is doing to the whole track.
I can see the light, but there's no way out. Trapped inside my mind, somewhere I won't be found.
You can hear and see there exactly how much gain reduction is being applied to the S's by using this particular plugin. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, why not leave a like down below, subscribe if you're new, and if you really like stuff like this, check out the other things that I offer over on my Buy Me a Coffee page and website. Links down in the description. Now, of course, as you probably heard there, the benefits of using these dedicated De-esser plugins is that they generally provide the best results and often quite simple and easy to use. And the cons really just vary from plugin to plugin, depending on how good the plugin sounds, how easy it is to use, etc. Those two plugins there, FabFilter Pro DS and TD-Esser, are some of the best de-esser plugins I've used. And of course, one is paid, one is free, so choose whichever one suits your budget and workflow. Feel free to also try out others, of which there are numerous around. I recommend doing some research and maybe downloading a few different trials of different plugins to see which work best for you. Now, in case all of those different options fail at reducing sibilance, or maybe they're reducing too much sibilance, making it sound a little bit too lispy or something along those lines, the final option you can use is manual de-essing. So let's go ahead and turn off this TD-Esser. And manual de-essing involves zooming into the waveform, splitting out the clip, and just simply reducing the gain of that clip at the point in time where that S, F, T, whatever it is occurring. So let's go ahead here and zoom in, and I can see here, and I know that this is where this S is occurring. Let's take a listen.
I can see. So
it's a bit too harsh. What I'm gonna do is go ahead and just select this range, split it with Command and E in Ableton Live, open up my clip view, and simply reduce the clip gain of this clip to turn down that S.
I can see the light.
Let's turn it down a little bit more.
I can see the light.
And then once we've reduced the gain, we can go ahead and apply a crossfade just so that it's a smoother transition between this chopped clip and this unchopped clip.
I can see the light.
And then we can adjust the range.
I can see the light.
And if it's too harsh, like I think this is, I'm just gonna go ahead and back off the gain reduction on this clip a little bit so that we can get it nice and smooth.
I can see the light.
And we could go ahead and do this for every single one of these sibilant sounds in our track. So for instance, there's more over here.
Trapped inside.
So I could select this, split that, reduce the gain, go back, create a crossfade.
Trapped inside my mind. Trapped inside my.
I could even do it with this T, etc., etc. You get the idea. Now, of course, the benefit for this is that it's really, really, really precise and controlled. You get exact control over the precise amount of time, the precise point in your audio that gain reduction is applied. Of course, it is only full band, however, like the compression option. And as you probably just noticed there, it is incredibly tedious, but it can still provide some really fantastic results that aren't possible with other de-essing options. That said, depending on how intense you go with it, you may find that you still need to apply some other de-essing through things like dynamic EQ, maybe later on, although it can often sound the most natural to just go ahead and do this and leave it without any other processing at all. And there you have it. There are 5 different ways of applying de-essing to recordings that might have harsh sibilant frequencies, particularly things like vocals. I hope this was useful to you, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something, and I'll see you all in the next video.